Good morning and welcome to AP Statistics. Today I'm going to go over the multiple choice portion of the practice test. And if you have any questions, of course, feel free to ask or join the Google Meet later today. So, number one, I'm going to go over the answers and my rationale. If a correlation is close to zero, it means that there's basically no impact of X, in this case the activities, on Y, the GPA. And that's what choice D says. There's no correlation. There's no relationship between those two variables. Number two, if the spending on tobacco, if you look at the spending on tobacco and the spending on alcohol, you see a pretty weak linear correlation. There is a point that's kind of weird out there. The point at 4.6, 4, it's very strange. It's very unlike the pattern. It's going to drag the LSRL down towards it, because that's what points that are off the path do. So if we get rid of it, it's going to make a real strong impact on the LSRL. Points like this are called influential. Sometimes they're called influential observations. Sometimes they're called outliers if they also fall outside the domain, or they're called regression outliers if they fall far away from the LSRL. In any case, E is the choice. This was quite influential. Number three. The statement they gave you basically defines R squared, which is the coefficient of determination. So it's C, the square of the coefficient is the answer. It's C. Number four, we're trying to predict your calculator score from your paper pencil score. Even if you flip the variables, it's not going to change the strength of the correlation. Other things can change, but the strength won't change because those points are still in the same pattern, whether you look at XY or YX. So statement one is a true statement. Statement two, slope can change if you're going to be switching axes like this. You could do a quick example. Just choose two coordinates and find their slope. Then if you reverse them, you find it actually can be reciprocal. For instance, I used 1, 5 and 2, 8 as just examples. Between 1, 5 and 2, 8, 8 minus 5 over 2 minus 1 is 3. If I reverse each coordinate, 1, 5, 8, 2, 2 minus 1 is 1, and 8 minus 5 is 3. It's 1/3. The slope has changed. So statement 2, not a good statement. Slope will change. Think of transformations from the earlier part of the unit. We said that standard deviation is affected by the B part of the transformation, which is the multiple shift, the slope, but not a constant. They gave you an equation for how we can translate the pencil paper score into a calculator score to make a prediction. They gave you a B value there as well. It's positive 0.865. If I multiply a standard deviation by 0.865, it's going to be smaller, right? So the calculator score is going to have a smaller standard deviation than the paper pencil score, which is what statement 3 says. So I believe that statements 1 and 3 are both correct. The answer choice is D. Number 5. All they really wanted you to do, and it was a confusingly worded question, all they wanted you to do was take the equation they gave you. I believe they gave it to you in the Minitab output, so remember how to read it. Plug in a 0.20, which was the degree of the water, and you find an activity score of 84.286 roughly. If you look for that, where about 84 is on the residual plot, you find that the point they have there is above the line by about 2.5, give or take. Well, 2.5 higher than 84.25 is about 87. So the answer is A, 87. That fish was a little more active than would be predicted by the temperature of the water. Number 6, they asked you to basically interpret either slope or standard deviation, depends on how you were reading the question. The standard deviation was 4.78505, which means that the average distance, the average residual between the expectations and the observations are about 4.78505. The slope was negative 3.2167, so for every increase of 1 on X, we are dropping 3.2167 on Y. The only answer that made sense there was about the standard deviation. It's the typical distance from the observation to the LSRL. is 4.785 units. It's not degrees. There's no rating here. It's a residual value. So C is the answer. C is the answer. 7, R has no meaningful label. R is your correlation coefficient. It tells you strength, form, and direction, but it doesn't have units. So it's not measured in inches. Therefore, B is the answer to choose. It is worded incorrectly. So it is the right choice because it's the wrong statement. Number 8, if you have a normalized distribution where mu is 0 and sigma is 1, then let's think about how we find the B value when we have compiled data. Remember, the B value is R times S sub y over S sub x, right? If they tell you the slope is negative 0.44, that's the B value, and it has to equal R, the correlation coefficient, times the quotient of the standard deviations, but they're both 1. So R times 1 over 1 is still R. Oh, that makes R the same as the slope. So negative 0.44, the answer is E. In a normalized distribution, the R value is the slope. Number 9, they gave you another equation, y hat equals 25.2 plus 3.3x. They wanted to know if the temperature went up, or no, if the number of chirps went up by 5, what would the difference in the temperature be predicted to be? Well, let's just pick some numbers, okay? Let's choose 10 for the number of chirps we see right now. What do we predict at 10? A temperature of 58.2 degrees. Okay, let's just say we hear 5 more chirps, so 15. I get a new temperature of 74.7 degrees. That's a difference of 16.5 degrees. The answer is B. Sometimes, just like the SAT, the best strategy is to choose values and see what happens. And finally, number 10, Ethiopia is a value here that is way high off of the line. Obviously, it's an impoverished nation. We don't have very many television sets. We also don't have many doctors. There's a lot of people per TV, and there's a whole lot of people per doctor. So what would the effect of removing it be? Well, just like in a previous question we talked about today, just now, Ethiopia would be considered an influential observation, and removing it would have a strong impact on the LSRL. In fact, it would allow the LSRL to settle down into the bulk of data, which would change it quite a bit. It's going to make the slope a lot less steep. It's going to decrease the slope. And I need you to remember what I said about every LSRL. Every LSRL goes through the average X, average Y. So it's kind of like it's going to pivot right there in the middle. And if my slope decreases, my y-intercept goes up. If the slope were to increase, the y-intercept goes down. Now, in this case, we have an LSRL that's reaching out towards Ethiopia. If we take Ethiopia out of the mix, the slope is going to decrease, and it's going to make the y-intercept increase. And that choice is C. That was our 10. How did you do? Score yourself. See if it was a good, bad, or indifferent result, and ask yourself, what could we do differently? Or ask me, because after all, you have the option. If you want to have a Google Meet and talk about any of these, let me know. If you want to work through anything while you're working on the homework that's about to come, let me know. Homework is the free response portion of this chapter test. So it's numbers 11 to 13, which I've included a new picture of, so you have it just in case your book's not accessible or you don't like to use it. Let me know if there's any problems or issues. This is due tomorrow morning by 7, and as always, please have it in to me so that we can review it then during class. I'll post a video tomorrow, and again, open the opportunity for a Google Meet if you want one, and we could talk about any of these issues. Clearly, we're working our way towards a Chapter 3 test. And also, clearly, you'll be home for it. So it's, let's say, a little easier on time constraints because you won't be forced to squeeze it into a 30-minute period. Because of that, I'm also going to say, do your best the first time out, and let's not worry about having to do corrections. Please, do your best the first time out. I'm not saying you can't do corrections. I'm saying, let us make sure that we take our time, but only our time. Don't use any other resources other than your calculator and your time. Let me know if there's any questions. Otherwise, that's all for today, and I will talk to and or see you tomorrow.